Hello and welcome back to Red Brick Recap. This is week 11 of Red Brick Recap, the last episode we have before the Thanksgiving break. I'm joined once again by my co-host, Ted. Ted, how are we doing on this fine Thursday afternoon?
We're enjoying the snow, and as you can tell, trying to get over a cold right before Thanksgiving. So we're battling, but we're here, and we're finally to week 11.
Yeah, battling's a good way to put it. I feel like both of us have been going through the grad school grind. Obviously, the snow is not helping at all, travel-wise and vibe-wise. But we're here. It's week 11. A lot to talk about this week. Some huge wins some wins on the court for Miami basketball, for women's basketball, and for Miami football on the field in their pursuit of another MAC championship. But we will get to all of that as soon as we can. Let's jump right in and talk about probably the most successful program Miami's had over the last decade, and that's field hockey. Unfortunately, their season came to an end on Sunday against Northwestern.
Yeah.
I believe that was that day. But a tough loss on the road in Evanston, ending another amazing season. What is it? 15 combined conference titles in regular season and in tournament play. That's just unbelievable from that team. A huge credit to what the coach has done over there. Again, that's probably the most successful program we have here at Miami right now. So another fantastic season. Congratulations to them and all their success this season.
Yeah, like you said, they played Northwestern. Northwestern was the number 2 seed in the tournament. That's always going to be a really tough draw. You're facing off against, arguably the top team in the nation. So it's tough, but it's nothing to hang their hats on or hang their heads on. It's a really, really good season. I'm interested to see how they do next season. They obviously lose 2 of the best players in Miami field hockey history, in Claudia Negrete Garcia and Paula Pena Martinez. Both of them were named to the 2024 collegiate senior team from the National Field Hockey Coaches Association. Basically, they're both grad students. They've been a part of the team for 5 years and have earned all MAC conference regular season titles and tournament championships in each of their seasons. So for 5 straight years, they were regular season and tournament champions of the MAC, which is an incredible feat. Incredible feat. And I want to say Negrete Garcia, she's been an all MAC basically since she got here. And then she was tournament MVP this year. So both of them, are going to be big losses next year. But for right now, enjoy another incredible season, and we'll see where it takes them.
Yeah, I think it was 4 times Negrete Garcia has been on the All-MAC team. And just to add on to that, like how many collegiate athletes ever can say they've won a title, not just a title, a tournament title and a regular season title in each of their 5 seasons? That's got to be a pretty select group. So congratulations to them. Just another amazing season. We also got to talk a little bit about hockey on the ice as well. We talked about it a lot. This was going to be a tough season. I don't think we expected it to be quite as tough as it's been. I think there was a lot of excitement coming into this year that maybe hasn't materialized on the ice. 2 more tough losses to UMD. Obviously, it's going to be a tough year with Noreen's first year. It's a transition year. There's a bunch of new players coming in, but I guess it's still better than last year is all I'm going to say. It's still better than what we saw from Bergeron's last team, and there are pieces to be excited about. Obviously, we've talked about the recruiting class a little bit, but at least for this year, it seems like another season where Miami isn't going to be at the forefront of the hockey world.
Yeah, I don't know if we were, maybe we were a little too optimistic going into the year because there was a new coach, because there's this new energy around the team. But yeah, it was bad against Minnesota Duluth. It was not fun. One of the games I think was 7-2. I think that might have been the Saturday night game. I had planned on going with my sister and my girlfriend to that game, and then we kind of were like, oh, maybe we shouldn't go. And then we went to dinner in Hamilton because it was somebody's parents' weekend, I guess, and every single Oxford establishment was filled. And I know I'm getting a little sidetracked here, but Oxford, create some more like sit down nice restaurants besides like the 4 or 5 that we have in Oxford. Like there needs to be more because every parent ever goes to the same 5 restaurants and it's always like packed on weekends. So regardless, that's my little rant. But yeah, we ended up skipping a game that Miami lost 7-2, which is like, ugh, like, yeah. So I mean, ugh.
I've been gung ho and I've been kind of banging the drum about our goalies for the last 3-4 weeks we talked about the hockey team, and I mean, it was ugly. Like both of their percentages dropped pretty significantly. I think Dalmir's dropped by like 4 or 5% just over the weekend alone. And looking at the stats overall, like you're not going to win a ton of games when half of your team is shooting under 10%. That's not exactly the conversion rate you want. Our top point getter right now has 11 in 14 games. For an offense that we talked about is like trying to be explosive and trying to kind of change the ways of the past, it feels like we're kind of reverting back to the norm of Miami hockey, which is hope to get 2 or 3 and play good defense. And obviously that hasn't been working. It didn't work this weekend, and it does not get any easier coming up. We play Omaha this weekend. I mean, we said in the notes, there isn't a ton to say. Like Omaha is likely going to be the better team, and have mercy. Let's hope. I'm not going into this weekend with high expectations. I think at this point, winning 3 or 4 conference games should be considered a success this year.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself. It's going to be a long season for the Redhawk hockey team, but hopefully this is the last kind of long season that we see for a while. But yeah, it's going to be rough sailing for this season and possibly next season as well. But I think once we get past these first kind of 2 seasons of bumpiness, and once the players that Noreen has brought in start to develop, I think we'll return to at least middle of the table. And I think if we're middle of the table in the NCHC, that would be considered a success of all successes.
Yeah, 100% agree. We talked at the beginning of the season. This was always a likelihood. This was always going to be possible. I don't think we wanted it to happen. We definitely came in with a lot of optimism, and obviously it hasn't worked out. But I mean, it's Noreen's first year. There's not a ton to really blame him for. It's a team and he inherited. He brought in the names that he thinks going to work. It's his first season. Let's get the system up and running. Let's get some kind of identity back, and then we'll readjust our expectations next season. Looking forward in the next couple of weeks, though, like it's a gauntlet. Like I think I keep underestimating just how tough the NCHC is to compete in. Like you're going to Omaha next week. That's a really good hockey program. Then you're going to North Dakota, one of the best hockey programs in the country. Then you're going to the defending national champions in Denver on the road, and that's about as tough as it gets right there. And then back to Omaha, and then Western Michigan. But like all of these teams have been very successful over the last couple of years, and simply put, Miami just hasn't been on their level. And it's kind of like, not to use the comparison, but it feels like we're almost in the Kent State role right now, where we just simply cannot compete with the other teams in our conference.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. It is a pretty brutal stretch of games coming up, because we got to go to Omaha, so we have to travel to Omaha for 2 on the road, which is brutal, and then we play North Dakota at home. And I'm gonna check this right now. I think he's still there, but at least last year, Ludwig Pearson was still on the North Dakota hockey team. And for those of you who don't know, Ludwig Pearson, he used to played at Miami for a very long time. And he was really, really good. He is like, top, one of the top goaltenders of all time at Miami, Ohio. So, that was a big loss. Okay, so he's actually not playing for North Dakota anymore. He's playing for Brynäs IF, which is part of the Swedish Hockey League, which makes sense given his Swedish background. But that's besides the point. Yes, okay, he is Swedish. Okay, cool. So they don't have to play Ludwig Pearson anymore, but North Dakota is still always really good. They churn out NHL players. Like, these are guys who like consistently are going to the big leagues, or at least to the AHL or the ECHL, and even Omaha to a degree. Denver, I mean, holy moly, the amount of NHL players they produce is like no other program in hockey. So it's Omaha on the road, at home versus North Dakota. Denver on the road. Then you play Omaha at home. Then you're at Western Michigan. Give me a sec. Hold on. Sorry. As you can tell, still battling a cold. But Western Michigan, for those of you who don't know about Western Michigan, they're a very, very good hockey program. You think like, oh, they're a MAC school. Maybe they're like us. No, they're really, really good. Like, Western Michigan is known for their hockey. They actually produced a a goaltender. He's in the AHL now. He plays for the Bruins. Busio is his last name, I want to say. And then you play Arizona State. Arizona State's probably the game that you're going to be most competitive in. That was the game that they were most competitive in last year. So it's probably going to be the same thing. So we may not see a win. It is Thursday, November 21st. We may not see a win until the end of January or February.
Yep. Yeah. One more note about North Dakota. I'm kind of doing a little bit of research here on the fly. They had 2 NHL first rounders last year in Sasha Boiver. I hope I'm saying that right. And EJ Emery. Boiver, I'm going to do a little bit of scouting when he comes to town. That's a Blackhawk, or hopefully a future Blackhawk. I'm a huge Blackhawks fan, so hopefully I get to see a flash of what's going to turn into a very good player, and hopefully a part of Bedard's supporting cast. And EJ Emery is, again, I don't know much about him. I'm not a huge hockey guy, but I mean, first round pick in the NHL, you've got to be something pretty good. And looking at the stats, I mean, Boiver's already got 8 points this season in 11 games. Already a much better shooting percentage than 99% of Miami's team. 3 goals, 5 assists. And Emery hasn't played a huge role this year. I think he only has 1 point, but still played in 11 games, still a huge part of this team, plus minus 4. So definitely a positive impact player, but clearly there is a talent disparity here that I think will probably be on display. And I think you're absolutely right. I think at least in this conference with how tough it is, there's a very real chance where we don't see a win until close to February. So
yeah, I mean, if you want to talk NHL players on University of North Dakota, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 players on that roster who have whose rights are to NHL teams. Miami has 1, and
we have 1.
I believe so. Let me do a little bit of research. I believe we have 1.
It's more than I thought.
Yes, we do. Casper Nason. He's a right wing from Sweden. He's a freshman, apparently. He's a freshman, 6'4", 199 pounds. Casper Nason. His rights are to the Boston Bruins. So yeah, okay. I didn't want to sound insane, but okay. I'm glad I looked that up. But yeah, 13-1.
Yeah.
And our one is a freshman, and no offense to our freshman, I don't think he's comparing currently to the 11 or 13 other guys on the team. And I mean, look, all of those NHL teams outside of the Blue Jackets are good teams right now.
Right, 100%. And I mean, looking at Nason's stats this year, I mean, there is potential there. He's got 6 points already in 14 games as a freshman. He's getting some consistent playing time. He has a -8 plus minus, which I think has more to do with the team around him than him. Obviously, I haven't done a deep dive on film study yet, but there's pieces to build off here. And obviously, it's not looking great right now, but it really can't get much worse than it was last year. So there are positives to take from it. Let's jump into some of the positives for Miami sports this week. Obviously, starting off with women's basketball against Austin Peay. I'll start off by saying one of my favorite mascots in all of college sports. The Governors is just a super cool nickname. But yeah, a good win on home court. Maybe not the best game of basketball, but got the job done, got the win, 3-1 to start the season. And the only loss, we talked about it last week, was the game against Xavier, where they put together a really impressive comeback.
Yeah, I'm surprised you like the Governors so much.
That's a cool nickname for me. That's a unique one, at least.
There's a high school, a rival high school that in Connecticut, and their mascot is the Senators instead of the Governors. But anyways, yeah, they were down 20 to Xavier. They came back. They fell short. Would have loved to see the win there, because I think Xavier snapped something like a 5-year losing streak against Miami or something like that. There's some stat attached to that, but overall, this was, as Coach Glenn Box put it, a kind of a gross win. I really I was able to do sidelines for this game, and after the game, I was like, I interviewed him, and I was like, oh, Coach, this was a really gritty, gutty win by your team. what allowed you to win? He's like, you're putting it nicer than I would put it. It was a gross, disgusting win. There were the story of the game for both teams was turnovers. 21 turnovers for Miami, 27 turnovers for Austin P. It needs to get cleaned up, as Coach Fox said at halftime. I was like, well, what do you need to do in the second half to do better? And he goes, stop with the turnovers. And he was really he's really trying to instill into his team, like, we can't have 11 more turnovers than we do assists. Like that's not okay. But overall, they were able to hold on to the lead. They led by, I don't know if this is going to tell me, but they led by a decent amount at some point during the game. I think it was, I think it was maybe 10 points at one point. It's kind of semantics at this point, but they were able to hold on, and it was a win is a win. A win is a win. It's the first time since 2021, 2022 that they are 3-1. So a really, really good start for this program that really kind of needs a direction and something to build off of, given the whole situation of how the former coach left and Box kind of rebuilding his program from scratch. But a win nonetheless. They play Hiram College tomorrow. And we'll see how that one goes.
Yeah, what's really interesting about this team, and I think it's unique in all of college sports, and even especially in college basketball, is how deep this team is. Like on looking at the roster right now, 13 players are getting more than 7 minutes a game. That is probably one of the deepest teams I've ever seen in college basketball at women's or men's level. And I mean, we've talked about some of the players already, but like Amber Tretter's basically averaging close to a double-double and at least getting close to that number pretty much every night. I know you talked about it in the notes, but like Angelina Gonzalez is a spark plug off the bench, or not off the bench, excuse me. But she's putting up great numbers as well. I mean, you have those two players who have become these kind of focal points for this offense, but you also have, I think, close to 10 players with scoring averages. Like, you've got at least 5 players with scoring more than 7 a game, and you've got 4 more averaging at least 5. Like, that's a deep team that can get buckets in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll talk about Angelina Gonzalez for a little bit because I really, really like her game. She came off the bench in the game against Austin P, and she played 31 minutes off the bench. That was the same amount of minutes as Amber Tretter. Now, Tretter fouled out, questionable calls. I will say that there were like 1 or 2 where I was kind of standing on the sideline being like, "Oh, that's ticky tack. Like that's gross." Like, but anyways, Gonzalez comes in with a ton of energy and a ton of fire and passion to the way she plays. Like after every bucket she makes, she's clapping, she's screaming. Even after a miss, she was like screaming. Like that's the type of energy you want coming off your bench. That's the type of that's what you kind of want to see from everybody. You want to see that competitive spirit and that competitive fire, and she's going to be a really big key to this Miami team, whether she's starting, whether she's coming off the bench. And she's a true 3-level scorer. She shot 2 from 2 from behind the arc. Like she's able to shoot the long ball. She had a couple or maybe 1 or 2 jumpers, pull-up jumpers from the elbow, and then obviously layups are layups, but she's a true 3-level scorer, which is something that I don't think this Miami team really has outside of Amber Tretter. So to be able to have someone who is very, very consistent all across the board in terms of scoring is huge. And I mean, she was second on the team in scoring last game. Maya Chandler, she's a grad student. She's been an excellent steady hand for this Miami offense. She had 13. Tamar Singer, I believe she's only a freshman or a sophomore. She's very young. She's a freshman. Okay, yeah. Tamar Singer, she's a freshman from Haifa, Israel. She is a defensive menace. I mean, she is just pickpocket. She had 5 steals. She's a pickpocket. And to have someone like that on your team is huge because you got Treader and DeFreeze down low, and DeFreeze had a bit of a tough game. She only played 14 minutes. The confidence is going to come to her when she gets chemistry built up. But to have someone as young as Tamar Singer play as well as she does is huge for this team.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we jump into some other sports, I want to take a look at their schedule coming up. Obviously, we talked about Hiram. Hiram's coming off a huge win against SUNY Delhi. It was 104-28.
Ooh.
Yeah, so coming in with a little bit of momentum. It's an exhibition game, so unsure how it's really going to affect Miami's schedule, but Hiram should not be taken lightly. This is a good team, and looking forward, there's also some really fun games to watch coming up. Like a lot of teams that we don't really see Miami play super often. So kind of some unique opponents. Like I'm looking at December 17th at home, Purdue's coming to town. I can remember the last time a Big Ten team came to Miami in any sport. So that'll be a fun one to watch. George Washington in Miami and Florida International in Miami. Both should be fun games. Both teams that Miami doesn't really play super often. So a lot of unique opponents in this non-conference schedule that should make for some really fun basketball to watch going forward.
Yeah, it's really nice to see Purdue coming into town. Purdue's always a good game. It sucks where it's scheduled because it's scheduled the first week of winter break, so like no one's gonna be here really. So that kind of stinks because it is Purdue. Like it'll be a good game. But it's also nice to see that they're playing in a little tournament down in Miami. The men's team has Fort Myers coming up, which we'll talk about in a second. But the women's team, they have this nice little Christmas classic. They get to play G Dub and FIU. So that's a nice little tournament for them, and they get to experience Florida in the wintertime, just like me.
Yeah. A little comment about Oxford during J term or winter break. It's my favorite time of year. There's nobody here. There's no lines anywhere. Like obviously the atmosphere at some of the games may not be as good as it is when students are here, but it is so nice going to like Kroger and not having to wait 30 minutes to get the self-register. So my favorite time of year. I'll probably be back to cover some of the games during the winter break. So hopefully it's the same. Hopefully I'm not spoiling like a best kept secret there, but yeah, let's move on and talk about Monday night's game for the men's team against Michigan. For the first 10 minutes of that game, I considered texting people like, hey, upset watch, keep an eye on this game. Obviously that did not occur and the final score is indicative of that, but there's a lot, in my opinion, to take positively from that game. That first half was as good as I've seen a Miami basketball team play here in the 4 or 5 years I've been here. Like, that was a very strong first half. And if a couple things go different ways, and we're looking at a very different scoreline, I don't think that the 30-point gap is indicative of how well Miami played, especially in that first half.
Yeah, I was in the same boat as you. I was live tweeting for that game, and man, the first, call it the first 16 minutes of that first half gave me a lot of hope that something was going to go our way. And then the last 4 minutes, when Michigan started to pull away and they were leading in half 44-36, there was an 8-point lead. Those last 4 minutes, if Miami could have just held it together just a little bit longer, I think there would have been more momentum going into Miami. But I think the fact that they were already almost down 10 going into half, I think they played a rough 4 minutes, and then it kind of just snowballed and Michigan got hot. That was one of the big things, is Michigan cut down on the turnovers. The broadcast was talking how they did it against TCU, where they had a ton of turnovers in the first and then they stopped in the second. Same thing happened in this. Ton of turnovers in the first half, and then they just stopped turning the ball over in the second half, which is not a good recipe for success, if you ask me. Especially against like the big top tier opponents. But overall, like there were a bunch of negatives to the games, but there were a lot of positives. And I kind of broke it down into three parts: the good, the bad, the ugly. So let's start with let's go into reverse. Let's start with the ugly, and we'll work our way to the good, because we've been talking a lot of negative today, and let's end on a positive note for this team. So the ugly, outside of Ian Elmer, Peter Suter, and Cam Kraft, the offense was non-existent. Antoine Woolfolk had probably his worst game in a Red Hawk uniform. He had 2 points, 1 of 4. He missed some bunnies.
Hmm.
That stuff he's got to clean up. He did it a couple times in the Wright State game, in the UMES game. That stuff he's got to get fixed for MAC play, because once you start getting the MAC play, every point counts,
Right.
every possession counts. He had 3 rebounds and 3 fouls, BS fouls, straight up. Like, he's standing straight up. What more do you want him to do? And he's getting called for fouls, and I think that messes with his psyche a little bit, where it's like, okay, I'm playing straight up. Like, what more can I do? Might as well just give him something,
Right.
give him a foul call. But Makai Cooper, he's been really struggling to shoot. There were a couple times where he just got his shot blocked because you're playing 3 7-footers. 2 points, 1 of 7. No turnovers, though. That's the thing I really want to emphasize. No turnovers. I think he had 4 or 5 in the UMES game. So no turnovers against a Big Ten team. That's huge. Peter Suter had 5 fouls. That can happen for your Swiss Army knife. Gosh, man, I'm not going to call out every single player, but I mean, Reese Potter, he got more minutes this time, which is a good sign. He's still gaining his sea legs back, so it was a little rough from him. And then the imbalance of fouls, 18 to 12, doesn't seem like a lot, but most of the fouls that we had were shooting fouls, and most of the fouls we gave them were like slaps on the wrist,
Right.
or loose ball fouls. Or I guess it's the other way around. They had more shooting fouls. We had more, we got to start getting to the rim more. So that was the ugly. The bad, Cam Kraft had his first meh game of the season. Wasn't bad, wasn't great. He really tried to take the offense into his hands, and I think Michigan knew that, and they just kind of forced the offense through him, knowing that he was the offense. And it's just like, all right, Cam, say, let's shoot the ball, please. Please, we need something. Steele wanted 43s in that game. He said before the game he wanted Miami to shoot 43s, according to Nick Stauskas, who was on the call that game. They got up 32. They made 11, which is a 34% clip. It's like, I mean, we talked about it. If they can shoot 40% from 3-point lines, they're going to be a hard team to stop.
Right.
So 34%. The bad news, they shot 40% from the field. Ew.
Yeah. For me, that's one of those, I think you have to give it up to Michigan's defense as well. They cleaned up really well in the second half, and that the first 5-10 minutes of that second half were just a tough watch. They were everywhere on defense, and I looked at the coaches poll. Michigan's picked to be the 9th team in the Big Ten. They did not play like the 9th best team in the Big Ten on Monday. They played like a team that can definitely compete and could be a sleeper, get into the February and March. Obviously, small sample size, very early in the season, but guys like Roddy Gale were really good. Trey Donaldson was outstanding. AJ Kaysen, or PJ Kaysen, I think I got that name right. LJ Kaysen was a stud off the bench, and he's a freshman, and he looked scary good. And you talked about it briefly, the 7-footers. Danny Wolf could be I think Stauskas said it on the broadcast too, could be a sleeper for Big Ten Player of the Year. I don't think he's going to win it, but looked really good. Will Shedder looked really good. I mean, Vlad Golden was kind of a viral star a couple of years ago with FAU when that team made a run with Dusty May. He's back and on Michigan, and he looked maybe not as good as he did with FAU, but I mean, you put a 7'1" guy in the center of the paint, and pretty much every team in the country is going to have a problem stopping you. So credit to this Michigan team. This was not a bad team that Miami got blown out by. This is going to be a very good basketball team. And maybe it won't be among the elites and the Purdue's and the Ohio States of the world, but they're going to be a very good basketball team this year. They're going to be a team to watch. But I think you're absolutely right. There were parts of this game where Miami just looked completely lost and unable to score the basketball, which just cannot happen against these teams. And we talked about it off camera a little bit. There are some of the lineups that go out there, and I just don't see an offensive threat. It just seems like there is no intention of scoring the basketball. And that needs to be cleaned up. I think at all times there needs to be a guy you can go to and get a basket. And right now, the only 2 people I can see kind of fulfilling that role, or 3 players I can see kind of fulfilling that, go to them at the end of the shot clock, let them make something happen. That's Cam Kraft, that's Peter Suter to some extent, and that's Ian Elmer. Those are the 3 players I can see kind of taking over on offense right now to start the season. Obviously, we've talked about the depth of this team and how anyone can kind of take over on any given night. We haven't seen it so far this year. Obviously, it's only been 4 games. There's a lot of time left for people to kind of step up. But right now, those are the 3 guys that I think are going to be crucial going forward. And I mean, we talk about it basically every time we talk about my men's basketball right now. Ian Elmer's going to be a stud. And I'll let you talk about him a little bit more. But I mean, I think if he plays the way he played on Monday and he played the way he played against UMES, that's a guy who's an all-MAC first or second teamer. Like, that's a guy who's going to be a problem for teams to guard week in and week out this season.
Absolutely. Well, I'll jump into Ian in a second. I'll finish up kind of the good here. But the bad, Peter Suter, when shooting a 3, he was 1 of 5. The good, when he was not shooting a 3, he was 4 for 4. Look at that. So take that how you may, but personally, I'd like to see Suter stick to inside the arc, because I think his like 3-point percentage right now is kind of atrocious, and I mean that in the nicest possible way.
I'll fact check you on that.
Let's see. He is shooting. Oh, I guess he's shooting 35% from behind the arc. I guess, okay, that's not bad. I guess I'm remembering the Wright State game where he shot 0 of 3 and Michigan where he shot 1 of 5. So, you know what? I'll eat my words on that one. That was a bad call. So Peter, keep doing what you're doing, man. But yeah, let's talk about the positives here. Dan Lewers, Grandpa, as they call him on the team, he got his first buckets in Miami Red. So it's just a little shout out to Grandpa Lewers. Miami won the turnover battle, surprisingly. They forced a lot of turnovers in the first half, not so much in the second half, but Coach Steele's a happy man when they can win the turnover battle. That's kind of what he likes to see. Rebounding, overall, like we've mentioned, it's tough when you have 3 guys who are around 7 feet. I think it's like the first time Michigan has had 3 people over 6'11" on roster since 2001 or 2004, I think it was. So, and considering we don't have anybody over, or okay, you know what? We have Reese Potter, and well, I'm stupid. But Reese wasn't playing, Reese minutes, so it's not like we had anybody really over 6'9" to kind of slow him down.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Sorry.
Oh, you're good.
And then Ian Elmer. Oh my gosh, I could go on and on and on about Ian Elmer. He was my favorite player to watch when he was a freshman, and he's taking his game to a whole nother level. He picked up right where he left off. He had 14 points, 5 of 10 shooting, 3 of 7 from downtown. He had 4 rebounds, 3 steals, 2 assists, no fouls. That's some really, really impressive stuff from just a sophomore. And you briefly alluded to it, but you stamp this down. Ian Elmer will make an all-MAC team this year. That's why, call it a hot take, call it whatever, call it Miami bias. Ian Elmer will make an all-MAC team this year. There are 3 all-MAC teams, which means there are 15 spots. You're telling me that Ian Elmer can't make an all-MAC third team? I call you crazy. This kid is doing absolutely everything for this Miami team. It's not just the offense. It's not just the defense. It's not just the intangibles. The kid is a total package. And if he just continues to score, like even if he scores 12 points a game, averages 5 to 6 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals, and a block a game, you're telling me that's not all MAC like level? Come on.
Yeah, no, he's been outstanding this season, and I mean, obviously it's early and it's a small sample size for his sophomore year, but lots of positives to build off. Looking at some of the stats right now, Miami has 41 offensive boards this season, which was a huge point of emphasis last season. Like, I remember there was a ton of games where Miami lost the rebounding battle, lost the turnover battle. So that's going to be a huge point of emphasis. And Ian's got 6 offensive boards in 4 games. He's everywhere. It seems like every game he has at least 1 steal and at least 1 block. So the defensive effort's there. And I mean, he's an athletic freak, so he can guard pretty much anyone on the floor. And we've already talked about the scoring a ton. Like, he had 24 against UMES, another, was it 15 against Michigan, something like that?
Mm-hmm.
That's about as much as you can ask for a guy that wasn't expected to be the team's number 1 option. Obviously, the number 1 option was supposed to be Kraft this year, with Elmer, Suter, and Wolfel kind of being the secondary options. But if he keeps playing like this, I don't know how you don't expect him to kind of take the reins a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I'd still run the offense through Cam, even if Elmer's continuing to get hot. I I have a hard time going away from Cam. This is no shot at Ian Elmer, but I mean, you mentioned it after watching the first or the inter squad scrimmage. Like Cam Kraft can get a bucket from anywhere. I think Elmer benefits from the fact that there are other guys you have to look out for on the floor, right? Like there is a Cam Kraft you have to look out for. There is an Antoine Wolfolk you have to look out for. He's not necessarily. I don't think he's always creating for himself. I think he's benefiting off the fact that there are others who can create for themselves, and he's the recipient of a lot of like open lanes, open passes. He's a really, really smart player, really, really cerebral. Like, I mean, he knows what to cut. He knows where his spots are, and he knows how to get to his spots. I mean, with and without the ball. But again, I think he kind of benefits from having, at least one, maybe two people in front of him. But if he continues to score at the rate he's scoring, like, I mean, heck, that opens up. I mean, that opens up our offense so much more, right? Like, if he's going to score, Cam's going to score, Antoine's going to score. Like that, just I mean, Peter's going to score. I mean, that opens up the offense so much, and I'm really, really excited for this game coming up against Siena. It should be a pretty even match, I want to say, even though ESPN gives us an 85% chance of winning this game. But I guess that makes sense considering that Siena's 3-2. They're coming off of two straight losses, both of which were double digits. But they barely beat Brown in overtime. They beat them by 1 point, 72-71. Brown's, not really known for their basketball team. They beat Bryant in overtime, 90-88. Again, Bryant's not really known for their basketball team. The last time I remember Bryant even being relevant was Doug Eater transferring after his run at St. Peter's.
Wow, yeah. That's a pull right there.
Yeah, Dougie Buckets 2.0.
Ted knows ball.
Ted knows ball. And then they had an 8-point win over American U, which, American U, a real powerhouse for basketball there. But then they lost by 10 to Albany, and then respectfully, I won't say the score for Xavier, but they got blown out by Xavier.
This is a team that, I mean, it feels like Miami has these kind of games every year where like they're expected to win, but doesn't always turn out that way. Like I think we played a Ryder last year, and Miami was expected to win pretty handedly, and ended up dropping that game, if I'm not mistaken. I'll fact check myself here in a second, but as much as Miami is expected to win this game, and we expect them to put on a good performance, it's not like we can just immediately say like Miami's going to win this game because we don't really know. It could be one of those where, Siena shows up to play. Fact checking myself here. I was thinking of the Wright State game. So obviously we talked about Wright State already and how we haven't beat them in like close to a decade now. But yeah, so look out for Siena. It should be a fun game. It's in Fort Myers too, so neutral site, makes for a weird environment. Not exactly in front of any team's home fans. New environment, weird kind of court setup, if I remember correctly from last year. So I think it'll be a fun game to watch. I'm excited to watch some neutral site basketball this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. It's in an arena called the Suncoast Credit Union Arena. It's on the campus of Florida Southwestern State College in Fort Myers.
Oh wow.
It is an actual basketball arena, which is nice. It's not like the Maui Invitational where you're playing in a ballroom. Although arguably that's way cooler. I like what they do with the court. They got little like seashells in the paint, and it's all nice and beachy themed. You got the beach and the sun in the middle, and you got the sand colored wood, and then you got the water and the shells, and but yeah, I mean, it'll be fun to watch. It'll be fun to watch some neutral site basketball. I may try to get down there. It is a bit of a hike for me from Jacksonville. I think it's about 5.5-hour drive, something like that. I may try to go down there. If I could get down there, it would be with the men's basketball team, of course. But I may try to get down there. I may not. It kind of depends. But if I can get down there, obviously I'll take pictures and I'll throw stuff up on my Twitter. But if you just want to check Twitter for updates, check the Miami basketball Twitter because I should be running that live tweeting that. So if you want to check in for that, that's where you check in. But yeah, just some players to make of note for Siena. Justice Schultz, he's averaging almost 17 a game, 4 assists. He's shooting 100% from 3-point land. Uh, so that's fun. He had 31 against Bryant. Major Freeman, he's averaging 14 points, and Marcus Jackson is averaging 8 points. The one matchup I want everybody to watch: Peter Carey versus Antoine Woolfolk. Peter Carey is 6'11", but it feels like a mismatch. That's 2 inches taller than Ant, but this feels like a mismatch waiting to happen. Ant should body this man. Okay, he's 6'11", yeah, but he's 205 pounds, and Ant is 235 of pure muscle. Like this should be a mismatch. So I would look to see Miami get Ant involved early, get the post play working early. But that's just my opinion. Obviously, I am not Coach Steele. I'm not making the decisions here. But I mean that's my opinion. But yeah, excited for Fort Myers tip off for sure.
Yeah, it'll be a fun weekend for sure. Yeah, like Ted said, if it's not on his Twitter, it'll be on mine. It'll be on Riverfronts. We'll post where it's going to be. One of us will be watching the game sometime, and we'll be live tweeting, and we'll have stuff up on the blog, and we'll keep the podcast going as usual. Actually, before we forget, we should talk about that too, about how next week's going to work with Thanksgiving. We're not going to do a pod on Thanksgiving for obvious reasons. We'll be with our family. We hope everyone listening takes the time to be with their family. You should not be spending your Thanksgiving listening to us yap about sports. That's probably not a productive use of your time on Thanksgiving. So we're still kind of internally discussing how it's going to work, but we'll have something up probably on the Sunday after the Bowling Green game, where we might be doing something live. And if we do, we'll post that and have that up for everyone to see. Obviously we'll get into that Bowling Green football game here in a second, but keep an eye on Twitter, keep an eye on the blog. We'll have updates for you guys on what we're going to do, how the content's going to work coming out. But we won't be posting. We won't be recording on Thursday. We won't be posting on Friday. So just keep an eye out for that stuff. But yeah, absolutely. Let's talk. Let's look forward to the Fort Myers game, and let's jump into football, which took place Tuesday night on ESPN for the world to see against NIU. Obviously, another just great performance by Miami. 6th straight win. Wasn't the cleanest game. Was not exactly played the way I expected it to, but it's a gutsy, gritty win in the MAC, which is all you can ask for, especially against a team like NIU, which has made some headlines this year given their Notre Dame result. In my opinion, probably one of the best crowds outside of the Cincinnati game we've had this year. It was very lively, very, very vocal, way to get behind the team. Something that I think has been missing in the last 4 or 5 weeks has been that home support. So it was really cool to see. And I mean, there's just so much to talk about from this game. Like it felt like every 4 or 5 minutes, something pretty cool was happening. I'll jump in and say first, shout out to Javon Tracy for throwing one of the best passes of the season. Yeah, I mean, even Chuck Martin said after the game, I don't know if Brett could have made that pass. And I mean, that was a dot. It was right in the breadbasket, gave only Reggie Virgil the chance to go and get it. I was a little nervous there for a second. I thought that Reggie was going to go right into my camera when he was making a beeline to the end zone. Before he made the adjustment, it was coming right at me, and I was terrified for my ACLs in that moment. But we avoided it. Got some cool shots. So check out the Twitter, check out the Riverfront page for some of the camera angles of that. But I mean, let's start with that. Like Chuck Martin busting out a trick play. I did not see that one coming.
My dad texted me, and he I think he just got like the ESPN notification, and it just said touchdown Miami. So he goes, Brett, touchdown pass, or like touchdown pass Miami, right? And I texted him, I was like, no, that was a trick play. It was like a jet touch pass to Tracy, and then Tracy dropped it in the bucket to Reggie Virgil, and he goes, Chuck Martin did not call that play. There's no way. And I was like, I'm surprised, as surprised as you are. Like, there's no way that, like, I mean, just an incredible play call. Gutsy too. It's not like, I mean, it's not like they were up like a ton and just busting it out to bust it out. It was like, I mean, it was out of nowhere. Like,
it was early in the second quarter.
Yeah, you don't see that. And shout out Javon Tracy. That was a dime. Like,
yeah.
Put it only where Reggie could catch it, and then I mean, if you look at the replay, Reggie had to like outstretch his hands, and it dropped perfectly into his hands. And now Javon Tracy's got a perfect passer rating.
Yeah, you'll see it if you go to watch the video I posted on Twitter. I thought the ball was still in Brett's hands. So I was following Brett, and I see Reggie streaking to the corner of the end zone. I'm like, wait, where's the football? And I kind of poke my head up. I'm like, oh, it's in Tracy's hands, and it's coming right towards me. So kind of had to make an on-the-fly adjustment there. But yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Coach Martin said it. He called it Wednesday's practice, which by my calculations would have been Sunday's practice, given their like week setup. Tracy asked like, when are we going to run that play? Because I'm 2 for 2. I'm perfect on it in the spring. We haven't run it yet. We got to do it sometime. And Martin said, well, NIU's about as stingy as a defense as there is. If we're going to have to trick one defense here, it's probably going to be NIU's. Worked out to perfection. Highlight play, probably one of the coolest plays I've seen in my career here at Miami.
Oh, yeah.
So shout out to Coach Martin for trusting his team to make that play work. The offense as a whole, in my opinion, was pretty meh, especially in that second half. The first half was really good. Like 17 points, probably could have been up to like 24, 25 if you take away the interception and make that field goal. Had 250 yards of offense. Like that's all you can ask for, especially with a good defense like that. Second half was a totally different story. Was not really the Miami offense we've seen over the last couple of weeks. Gabbard got crushed in the second half. There was at least 4 or 5 hits where we were thinking like that one might be the one that takes him out of the game because he was getting drilled in the backfield. And I don't know what changed on the offensive line scheme or if there was just an adjustment made on NIU's defense, but it completely took away the passing game. Like everything that was working in the first half was not there in the second half. So credit to NIU's coaching staff for making those adjustments. And we'll get to it in a second, but credit to Miami's defense for keeping them in the lead because there was definitely a stretch there where it felt like NIU was going to make a comeback.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give credit to the NIU defense. I don't know if it was necessarily a Miami issue as a whole, but I think NIU. I mean, give credit to NIU's coach, whose name I'm forgetting. It's Thomas Hammock.
Thomas Hammock.
Give credit where credit is due. That he's a good coach, man, and he probably went into that locker room and made a ton of adjustments defensively, and there's a reason that NIU is one of the stingiest defenses in the MAC, right? Like, sure we looked good in the first half, but you know what? There's a reason that NIU is stingy, and they were able to adjust and they clamped down. And credit where credit is due. They made Miami feel the pressure. But if we want to talk about stingy defense, let's flip it to the Redhawks. I mean, holy moly, that was an incredible defensive game from them.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, Salopek, we talk about him every week, continues to be a stud. This week was a breakout game for 2 players, in my opinion. Ty Wise was everywhere. We talked about him before the season as kind of being this guy who's expected to lead this defense. Not to sound hard, but he hasn't been as good as expected throughout the entire season. That's not to say he's been bad at all, but I think expectations were a little bit higher, and maybe he's been kind of on the wayside a little bit. Granted, 11 tackles on Tuesday, which is his season high. Really good performance for him. Once again, Brian Ugu just continues to be an absolute menace on the edge. Like he was everywhere. It seemed like he was in the backfield on every single play. Got called on that ticky-tacky roughing the passer call. I didn't see it. I didn't see a replay of it in the press box or after the game, but I got texts from like 4 or 5 people that was just not the call to make in that situation. Obviously, that set up the only NIU touchdown of the night. Take that away, and that's a pretty flawless game from him. And then Corey Suttle. We've talked about him a little bit on the pod, but again, like when you have guys like Salopek and Wise, he kind of falls into the secondary category of players we don't talk about a ton. He had a great game. Like he forced the fumble that ended up in Ugu's hands that set up the field goal that Jobin had to put the game out of reach for NIU and kind of force them to kind of throw the ball a little bit more. And he had the blocked field goal. I didn't notice it until after the game that it was his hand that blocked the field goal. So huge game from him. Huge game for the defense as a whole, but especially those guys kind of stepping up and taking initiative to make sure that NIU had nothing going in the second half.
Can we just talk about that blocked field goal for a second? Like that was loud. Like you could hear it on like on the camera. You could hear the boom, and then also like, did you see how far that ended up? Like that ended up on the opposite side of the field.
Yeah, no, it ended up at the 50-yard line, which I think the kick was from like the 30. Like that
Yeah.
ball flew an easy 20, 25 yards in the air because it didn't roll a ton.
No.
It sat. It was a good 20 yards in the air. Like that was a full palm on that football.
Yeah.
That was not a fingertip block. That was a full hand that got up there.
Yeah. He
Um,
probably could have caught it if he wanted to.
yeah, I mean, it never stood a chance. The kick was going to be blocked as soon as the snap was kicked. A couple more names I want to shout out before we move on here and start talking about what's going to be probably one of the biggest games in recent Miami history. Dylan Downing, first touchdown as a Red Hawk. We talked about him a little bit before in the preseason. I kind of expected him a bigger role as kind of this like secondary option as a running back. He's been better in the last couple of weeks, but for him to get in the end zone is a huge sign of how he's going to play moving forward. Reggie Virgil, we talked about every week, 6th straight game with a touchdown. He is crucial to this offense. And Keon Mosey, the 100-yard streak is over, barely. Very sad. Coach Martin said it in the post game. NIU's run defense is as good as there is in the MAC. It's probably the best in the conference. And for Mosey to even still get even close to 100 is just a testament to how good the O-line play has been and how good Mosey's been this season. But the streak is over. Very unfortunate. But yeah, I think all around that's a good team win. A lot of players really stepped up. A lot of players just played their roles, and that's all they needed to do, which is great. I will say for Gabbert, he ended his 117 completion streak, which is unfortunate. He kind of forced the pass a little bit. I didn't see a great angle of it, but it didn't look like he had the play there. But at the end, it didn't end up mattering, so I'm not going to get on him for that. Did what he needed to do to get the win and took some shots and stayed in the ballgame. So good team win, gutsy team win, and bring on Bowling Green.
Yeah. The video game player in me, when they had the ball with 15 seconds left, you had 3 timeouts left. All you had to do is just give it to Mosey for 9 yards. Get this, but I mean that's so unsportsmanlike. So
Right.
obviously Chuck Martin's the coach for a reason, and you're not letting a college kid run the show. Milestone watch. Matt Solopek. He's got 99 tackles this season. He's 1 tackle away from a 4th straight 100 tackle season. It will be the first in Miami history. It will not be the first in NCAA history. I know 2 years ago, a Troy linebacker, I literally read the ESPN article today. I cannot remember his name, but a Troy linebacker, he reached the feat, excuse me, a couple years ago. But yeah, Bowling Green, let's talk about it quickly. It is a win and get in for Miami for the MAC championship. It is as simple as that. They control their own destiny. This is the situation you want to be in. You don't want to win and then it's like, oh, Buffalo's got to win and Toledo's got to win and this has got to. You don't want that. And obviously, it's a win or win or go home for Miami. There is no if and or but about it. I think, or at least that's the way they should be treating the game. And Bowling Green, they play Ball State on Saturday, and I think it's for them. It's no matter a win or a loss. Bowling Green versus Miami will be whoever wins decides the title game.
Yeah.
Because I don't think Ohio will lose their last game, but we get another chance to beat them in the MAC championship. That'd be very sweet.
That'd be pretty cool. I think Bowling Green's probably the toughest MAC opponent we're going to play this year. And I mean, I keep talking about what Coach Martin says in the postgame, but he said it like the schedule makers did not do any favors to the Redhawks this year. Like you're ending with probably the 2 toughest games you're going to play in the MAC this year. Obviously, Ohio is good, but didn't really put up a fight against Miami when they came to town. Toledo obviously is a really good football team. I still think Bowling Green's better, in my opinion, and they've showed it throughout the season. I mean, the MAC is always a grind, and to come out at the end of the season with the record that they have is super impressive. I think it's a testament to that coaching staff and that team. And they've got some ballers, man. Like that tight end, Fannin. I mean, you said you have it here. He's a Sunday player. He's going to play on Sundays. He's going to be a draft pick, and he's going to be an impact player. Miami's at times struggled to guard tight ends this year, and we kind of saw that in the Cincinnati game where Royer kind of had a massive game. So it'll be interesting to see how they scheme for that. That might be a man coverage on every play kind of thing. Again, I am not the coaching staff. I am a guy in college who sits on a podcast and yaps about sports for a week. So I don't know how they're going to do that, but I think it'll be an interesting storyline to watch. I had the tweet pulled up. There's 3 teams that are just win and get in. It's Ohio, it's us, and Bowling Green. Whoever wins this matchup goes to the MAC championship, assuming the results in other games go as according to how they're supposed to. Obviously, there is a mathematical chance that Western still gets in. There's a mathematical chance that Toledo still gets in, and there's a mathematical chance that Buffalo still gets in. But if you're an Ohio fan, if you're a Bowling Green fan, if you're a Miami fan, next week is going to be crucial, and it's going to be stressful as all get out. So the football fan in me is looking forward to it, but the Miami fan in me is also dreading it. So I think it's going to be one of the best games of the year. I think it's going to be must-see TV whenever it comes. I think it's Friday at like noon, which is just a strange time to play that game, but neither here nor there. That's going to be must-see TV, and it's going to be a signature win if the Redhawks can pull it off.
Okay, so Miami's 6-1 in conference, right?
Yeah.
And then assuming Bowling Green wins on Saturday, they'll be 6-1 in the conference.
Correct.
So if they both lose, let's say Ohio loses, they play Ball State. But if Ohio loses, is Ohio in no matter what?
I think Miami gets in if Ohio loses because we have the tiebreaker over OU.
Well,
unless Toledo wins and then suddenly they jump both of us.
Let's look at the MAC football tiebreaker real quick.
I feel like we do this every week now.
We have to.
We've been tracking this. I have the tweet. I have the tweet here from the MAC Sports Connection.
Yeah, it's
Miami wins out, they're in. BG wins out, they're in. So whoever wins that last game is probably in. Ohio has to win out, and they won. So they're going to that last game against Ball State. They win that, they're in. Toledo has to go 2-0 and hope for results. Buffalo has to root for Toledo to go 2-0 and then hope that everyone else goes like 0-2, which is kind of gross. Somehow Western Michigan is still mathematically alive, but it's like they need like 9 results to go their way before they're even like in consideration. So they're kind of out of the picture. But there is a world where Toledo gets in, Miami doesn't, and Bowling Green gets in and Miami doesn't. There's also a world where OU and Miami play. There's like 8 different combinations of how this end of the season can go. I guess honestly, I don't have the brain power to comprehend all of it. So it's gonna be one of those where we just kind of wait and see.
Yeah, I guess I'm just kind of confused because it's like say Ohio loses, overall record does not matter. So like we can get rid of overall record because Ohio will have the better overall record than anybody in the conference. Well, actually, you know what? What are we 7-4 now?
We're 7-4.
Actually, we'd be tied if Ohio loses to Ball State, but they'd have a 6-2 record. We'd have a 7-1 record, and Bowling Green would have a 6-2 record. So head-to-head competition between the 2 tied teams. Let's just say Ohio and Bowling Green are the 2 teams against are the 2 teams that have records. I'm going to pull up Bowling Green football, their schedule right now, because I'm very curious about this. I know you don't have the brain power to figure this out, but I'm going to figure this out. But they're 6-4, 5-1 in the conference, assuming they go 6-1 and then they go 6-2. If they both lose to Miami, common opponent, that's out. If they both beat Ball State, common opponent, that's out. Western Michigan did Ohio State. OU did not play Western Michigan, so that's not a common opponent because it's actually, wait, head to head, did they play each other this year? No, they didn't. So the first one gone. Then it's the win percentage against common opponents. They're both 1-1 right now. If we're using common opponents, they both beat Kent State. Did they both play Northern Illinois this year? This is why we need divisions, man. This is why we need to bring up the divisions. UMass is ruining the freaking MAC, man.
I mean, we could sit here for like 30 minutes and dissect.
Both beat Central Michigan. They both beat Akron. Oh my gosh, they have the exact same win percentage against common opponents.
I joked about it, but does it come down to the coin flip? Does it come down to the draw names?
Win percentage versus common opponents based on their order of finish. Overall conference win percentage with tie breaks. So it literally it would come down to the win percentage against common opponent. No, because if it's all the same common opponents, because they
Ted,
so
there's a
okay,
world. There's a world where we have the
no,
coin flip.
no, it would not be the coin flip because it would have to be the tied team with the higher ranking by the team score rating metric provided by Sports Source Analytics following the conclusion of the regular season games. It would come down to the fourth out of fifth step.
Oh my
It would
gosh.
not go down. It would not. It would not. No, remember. I mean, I guess it would be a coin flip too, but it's technically the hat drawing.
Oh, the hat draw. Sorry. Yeah.
By by some like intern, Max
Oh my
Sports
gosh.
intern.
This is
But
why the
no.
MAC is the best conference in the world. Where else in sports do you see this coming down to this? Like
Okay.
this is elite.
Okay. Ready? This is the result we're hoping for. We Ball State to lose to Bowling
Oh yeah.
Green.
Oh, to Bowling Green. Yeah.
First the Bowling Green, then Bowling Green to lose to Miami. Miami 7-1, top of the conference.
Yep.
Then we need Ball State to play their their damn hearts out against OU and beat them, so we could see this. Because you know how funny it would be if OU if OU loses and then their team rating score is lower than Bowling Green, or they have to pull their name out of the hat and Bowling Green gets picked out of the hat, and then OU just went from top of the conference, like locked to make the MAC championship, to being out of the conference championship because they got pulled by they didn't get pulled by the intern. You know how funny that would be?
I'm not sure what I would prefer. I'm not sure if I'd prefer beating OU in the MAC championship or if I would prefer if OU misses out because of the analytics and the hat draw.
I think it would be funnier if OU had no control at all. If some random intern was just like, boop, up Bowling Green, you get to make the MAC title game.
That would be elite, and that would be all over the internet, and that would be probably one of the funniest storylines of the season. Well, Ted, we are once again out of time. Thank you again for coming on this week. We got through a lot today, and we got a lot to talk about in the next week. Have a happy Thanksgiving. We will talk to you after the break. Any final thoughts before we get on out of here?
Last game will determine the mood of our podcast. So if it is a win, we will be happy. And I'm not even going to say the other option because we're going to beat Bowling Green. Stamp it, prove it, whatever. Like, go Miami.
Go Miami. We will see you all at some point next week. We will let you guys know when the pod's coming up. We'll let you know if we're doing a live show. We'll keep everyone in the loop. But thank you guys for watching this week. We will see you all after the holidays.
All right.